Can y'all hear me? You know, old band joke. My husband's an old band member, and it's like they always say, I have a friend in Poland. I have a check 1, 2, check 1, 2, check 1, 2. Okay, sorry. Yeah, right. Don't forget to tip the wait staff. Okay, so we are going to talk about 508 compliance, or actually we're going to talk about accessibility, because really that's what this session is really about, is accessibility. But before we do that, it helps me to know who you are a little bit. So, how many people do we have out here who are instructional designers? Okay. I am getting feedback. Oh, do not step behind the speaker. Okay. Sorry, guys. Try this again. All right. How many of y'all are e-learning developers? That is almost a 50-50 split. A few more ISDs. Learning managers. Couple of y'all. Business managers, consultants, we've got one of you. Anything else that needs to represent? No? 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 Graphic. Oh, graphic designer, you're awesome. This session is really important to you, and you play an important role in accessibility. Yes. All right, how many of you are just curious about accessible learning? You're here. So we have, okay, we have a couple of you. You're actively working on compliance. Good. I think I can help you a little bit. And then you're just like, it's not required where I'm at, but accessibility really matters to me. There you go. Awesome. Yay, you. Awesome. And last one for me, because it's near and dear to my heart. How many of you all are familiar with customizable courseware? Awesome, awesome. These guys over here can tell you how to win an iPad. So, okay, let's get into the session. In this session, the 3 things we're going to try to accomplish today in our time. We're going to look at a process for defining your target level of accessibility that you want to hit in your organization. We're going to look at some high-level design strategies to save you time and money as you attempt to do that. And I'm going to give you some links to compliance checklist tests and some authoring considerations that you need to succeed. Now, a lot of the links, this is a disclaimer, a lot of the links in this session are going to be really teeny tiny, and I really want you paying attention to me. If you get me your card or your information afterwards, I will make sure that when we publish the blog post with all of the links in it, that you get a copy of that. Okay. So why develop accessible learning? My most important reason is because human-centered design is really important to me. I care about the people that are taking my learning, and I want to make sure that they have a good experience. What other reasons do people have to, think about creating, why they create accessible learning? Anybody? It is loud in here. So that everybody can learn. I love that. I love that. Anybody else? Yes, sir? Because it is required, right? So the 3 main reasons, there's really 3 reasons that people do. One is because from a sort of a marketing standpoint, either because other than human-centered, one of them is from a marketing standpoint, they want to make sure that their product or their learning in the marketplace is well accepted or accepted internally, because you are marketing internally as well, right? So they basically want to get the learning out to as many people and get it accepted as possible. And the last is the risk-reward factor, the compliance versus the cost that comes from bad PR or from actually getting in trouble because you did not comply with a regulation and you work in a regulated environment. So Section 508 is the what side of that you need to do in order to be compliant. But the WCAG standard, specifically now WCAG 2.0, those are web development guidelines for accessibility that have now been sort of married or incorporated officially into 508 as best practices. So basically what we're looking at is saying 508 tells you what you need to do to be compliant, but WCAG standards will tell you how to be compliant. They're not specific to e-learning, they're specific to web development. But as one of my early mentors, Bill Horton and Kit Horton, what they've said is a e-learning course is really nothing more than a giant website on steroids when you get right down to it. And as we're developing more and more HTML5 and developing, using tools that are really, we've moved away from Flash and we're developing tools that are outputting very similar to what web developers are using. Never has that been more true. So WCAG guidelines are for making content accessible to all learners, including those with disabilities. WCAG does not say specifically, these are 508, if you're disabled, do this. They say, this is good usability, do it. So they outline in the WCAG 2.0, they outline best practices for making your content universally perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. POUR, P-O-U-R. And I'm not going to go deep into any of these because the links that I'm providing give you all the back information. Any of this that you're interested in, you'll be able to go back, and when you have time and it's not so loud, you'll be able to go back and read it and really go into depth. They also define in WCAG 3 different criteria for inclusive e-learning design with compliance levels. There's an A level, a double A level, and a triple A level, okay? These guidelines were not set up to make developers' lives more difficult. They are invented to make it easier for people who interact in different ways when they're interacting with your content. They're not lesser ways, they're different ways that people have of interacting with your content. Better usability is just plain good instructional design. So, how do you go about this? You decide you need to go, for whatever reason, you need to go get your courses more accessible. The first thing you're going to do is look at your current state, your current level of maturity. If you're in the ad hoc state, we don't really formally do it, we dabble. You move to the planned state, where you start setting up some policies and procedures for making this happen. You get to a resource state, you need to get buy-in from the top, get the right tools, get the right templates, and get things together so that you can move that. And then finally, last, once you're delivering, you need to be able to test what you're doing and get feedback so that you can move into a continuous improvement loop. This is no different than any other level of instructional design. It's really kind of ADDIE for accessibility. Start by performing an audience analysis. What is your current state? Where are you at? And what is the need of your users? Now, there may be different levels of users that have different levels of need. If you're an organization that has people out in the field Or say you're a manufacturing organization, your people who are working on the floor may have very different levels of needs for access in the environment that they're in than the people, say, working in the back office. So you want to kind of look at this both ways and say, what is the percentage of users do I have that have a need for adaptive technology? And then you also want to break it and slice it differently and say, what are the needs of the different groups based on their roles in their work environment? And, you know, just kind of to the best of your ability, given your resources, you just kind of, sometimes, I know I've been there, sometimes you just have to kind of like thumb in the wind. Other times, if you're going to a big initiative and you're going to make a formal program curriculum-wide, then you're going to get together a group and work on this and hit it harder. The needs of your audience for adaptive technology, they might need certain needs because they have an auditory, a hearing issue. But also, learners who are in your workplace, who are working in a really loud environment, they might also appreciate that closed captioning. At the same time, when you have workers who are working in an open office situation where there's a lack of privacy, they may also appreciate closed captioning. If people have a visual disability, they're going to be a screen reader user, so you need to pay attention and learn a little bit more about how the screen readers work. There are some special things you need to do in order to make your content work with the screen readers. It's getting easier, and the tools are getting better at helping you. If somebody is mobility impaired, they have a motor impairment, they're going to be using either a tab key or some other kind of clicker or input device, maybe a joystick of some kind, something. So at the same time, we have a lot of people who read very quickly. They're able to absorb information quickly. And we talk about click next, click next. They may want to just click tab, click tab, click tab to get through as quickly as possible as well. And then last, you may have folks that have a learning disability. And those folks have an issue with reading and processing information. They are going to appreciate the time that you take to chunk and organize your information, use proper headings, and not give them timed interactions, because basically, unless you have to test somebody on how quickly they can do something, forcing them to do it while a counter is clicking down really does not add to their learning experience. So you're going to start by creating a Rockstar accessibility team. On your team, you need somebody who's going to provide the leadership and the strategy. This person needs to have the authority to say yay or nay on your guidelines, because the guidelines that you adopt are going to affect the time it takes and the overhead that it takes to develop your course, and that's going to affect the cost overall of the courses that you develop. Now, I have some ways that using templates, we can kind of help that somewhat, but it still needs to be a decision that's made with somebody at the top by somebody who has some form of authority. You need instructional designers who have the ability to chunk and organize the content. Also, the IDs later on, when you start developing your template, they have the ability, when a dev comes and says, this is too hard, this takes too much time, can we teach the same thing equally effectively but differently? And the ID is the only person in your organization who really can answer that question with authority. Visual graphic designers, you're going to be responsible for contrast, font size, colors, images, multimedia. You're going to need to establish rules for not using, not locking the text into the image and making sure that the text is always readable, as well as visually appealing, because believe me, we've got an awesome design team, and a course that looks better is very often better learning, especially when the visual elements help organize the information on the screen. So it's kind of a dance between all the members of the team who are working in concert. And then last but not least, we need technical developers who are capable then of saying, we can provide this experience. If we use this tool, we can do this way smarter, and therefore we can meet the AA level without adding a whole bunch of unnecessary overhead. And if you can in any way possible enlist testers who are actually users of assisted technology. One of the things that was the hugest, most eye-opening for us when we were researching on our team for customizable courseware and how can we try to make it more accessible using 3 different development tools, we actually watched a video on YouTube of somebody using a screen reader. And it is not like closed captioning. It is a very different experience. They turn up, they read very quickly, and the reader itself is giving all kinds of information about what the buttons are and what's on the screen, and next, tab. If you are writing accessible content, you're going to need to test in a screen reader yourself and get to know somebody, ideally who has one, who can help provide you feedback on what kind of experience you really are providing for them. Last but not least, designate out of that group that you've assembled in your team. And some of the people on the team may have more than one role. That's fine. You can have one person or 2 people have more than one role, but all of those roles need to be covered. Designate one of them as the team lead. The ultimate team lead is when you run into a problem at some point, they are the single point of contact and they're the single decision maker that says, we will do it this way. This is the final decision. Get to know the standard. I provided you the links, the checklist, and the PDF links where you can get to know the standard. Make sure the folks on your team, before you meet and go through it, kind of read through it and get an idea of what the standard is, and then bring the compliance team all together. I'm sorry, okay. Got it? Got it? Again, when you go to these links, when I get you these links, you're going to have everything. I give you everything. It's the eLearning Brothers way. We always give you the source. So, all right, when you do your compliance team review, you're going to go through the checklist one item at a time and say, hey, how does this affect graphics? How does this affect dev? How does this affect your writing? Remember, when you're writing, write it this way. And you're going to make a determination. We're going to try, when possible, to hit a AAA on that, but really for us and our audience, the AA is enough, or maybe even just the A level of compliance. What does that mean? WCAG even recognizes that there is a trade-off between certain levels of interactivity and certain levels of things you may want to do within your course and certain accessibility standards. They recognize that not every organization will be a AAA. It's not a race to AAA. It's a race to the highest possible standard within the constraints that you have that provides an acceptable and equal learning experience to the target audience in your organization. Again, this just talks about a little bit about, it touches on the difference between an A is the basic that you're going to need to do for screen readers, down through the AAA is the most comprehensive, but is also the most restrictive. Most organizations do try to strive for a AA, and a lot of the best practices live in the AA. what does that look like? So in the guidelines, when you're looking at the recommendations for, say, use of color at a level A, color is never the sole method of conveying content or distinguishing visual elements. I'll show you an example of that in a minute. But it means basically that if you have something that's red light, green light, yellow light, and somebody who is colorblind is not going to be able to tell necessarily the red light, the green light, the yellow light. You also must provide something else. In our case, when we were giving feedback, we use color, but we also use a check mark for correct and an X for incorrect. Because that way, no matter what, you're getting two different ways. Color is not the sole way of doing it. For level AA, images and text, you'll notice there's a 4.5 to 1 contrast ratio, and text must be at least 18 point. And then when you get to the AAA, at the bottom, text and images have a contrast ratio of 7 to 1, and large text at least 18 point or 14 point bold. So in our customizable courseware, we kind of hover between a AA and a AAA, depending on the density of the content on the particular screen that we're giving. But we're in there somewhere in the middle. And then if the same visual presentation can be made using text alone, an image is not used to present that text. We, again, try to use both. If you provide the image, also provide the descriptive. Either provide the description in the body copy or include the descriptor in the alt tag for that. So when the screen reader reads it, it'll provide meaningful information to the learner. And we'll talk about that again a little bit. Next, now that you've decided, you've gone through with your team, and you've decided item by item, we're going to try and hit, this is the standard that we're going to try and hit for text. This is the standard we're going to try and hit for when we have multimedia, etc. You've gone item by item, and you've created your own internal checklist for standards. Now, which tool is the best tool for you to use to meet those standards? Use the right tool for the job, said everybody's grandpa ever. So the reality is some of you will have the tools you have, because some of you, your tools are dictated already by your organization, and now at this point, your job is to fit a square peg into a round hole. Others of you now will be going shopping, and you'll be saying, of these things that are most important to us, these 5 are the hardest to do. And when you go interview or go to the accessibility site of your tool, your tool provider, you'll be able to review and see how that's done in that tool. That may or not, if it's hard and takes a lot of time, that may not even be a deal breaker if you can templatize it, and then when that interaction happens, reuse that template over and over again with the hard work done for you. This table, don't ask me where I got it. Don't use it for reference. If you take a photo of it, follow the disclaimer. I found it somewhere on the internet. The only purpose of this table is to say all of the tools approach these things somewhat differently. And so when you're creating your output, you need to know how your tool will output for HTML or HTML5 or whatever output that is, so that the screen reader will be able to read it. The next step is, now you have your tool, now you have your guidelines, you're going to templatize. So what we did was, for customizable courseware, we actually created a storyboard template that matches to our interaction templates. So when our IDs are writing into the storyboard, they know what the boxes are, how much space they have, what they need to fulfill, where they put feedback, etc. And then when it goes to the devs have already have a compliant interaction in that tool to be able to fill our text into as a container. They may skin it a little different. We may adjust some things depending on that particular page. But we actually are using G-Slides as our storyboarding tool. And because we templatize our storyboards can be very comprehensive as well, because we're not reinventing the wheel every time we do a storyboard. We're looking at something and saying, we need to present something that is in 5 different sections. We have about this much information. And it's very, very important that once they build, they be able to see all of the 5 different things together. That tells us what types of templates to pull from to convey that type of information. And that gives us the starting point. Every course then will have some specific deviations depending on that content and the subject matter we're hitting. But I know from working with custom, everybody thinks every course is custom from beginning to end. In every custom course, there is a large percentage of time that you are presenting different types of content and you're conveying meaning through presenting content. So those places are very easy to templatize. So then, yes, then we have a framework for each of the tools. In customizable courseware, we're developing for the same content in Captivate, in Lectora, and also in Storyline. We have an approved framework template that we use for each of the tools. And then we also have some static content pages that have already been styled and set up. And we have interactions. And we also have quizzes that we use. You're going to want to set up these same things within that are already compliant to your level of compliance. And then basically when your IDs are designing, they can use that as kind of like a deal-a-meal and pick, to the extent possible, pick from those. And then when there are things that need to deviate, that's when you go back to the well and get the compliance team together and say, how do we do this in such a way that is still compliant within our guidelines? You're going to need to be able to order the content that's on your screen. When a screen reader comes to your content, it has a specific way of hitting, depending on the tool you're in. Some of the tools, like in Lectora, it actually goes from how you, the items that you have that you've set up on your screen, and it'll go down through boom, 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 and read them. Other ones, it uses headings. Some of them you assign the order when you're setting it up. But you want, for example, when the reader hits your page, you don't want it reading the feedback before it reads the question. So you have to tell it in some way, and your specific tool that you're using will have a way that it is expecting to get that information. You also want to be able to, as a best practice, skip the navigation. So you want to tell the reader, don't read again all of that navigation. You want it to skip decorative images. If there is no information being conveyed by that image, you want the screen reader to just skip it. You don't want to alt tag it. You want to put what they call like a no alt tag so that it just skips it all together. And then any other extraneous, decorative, whatever items that are on the page, because when the reader's going through and that person's hitting tab, 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 when they keep having to hear this same, you know, image, image, button, button, blank, 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 I mean, they get pretty adept at skipping that, but it's tiring. So why make your users work harder? Then test early, test often. You want to make sure that your framework is well tested and that your templates, as you build them, that are all well tested. And then you want to have a real live user go through and test the course and the experience of the course once the whole course is put together. Sometimes putting things together, devs accidentally break things. Sometimes things being together, they just don't play the way that you would expect them to when you had them separate. They might be fine, but when you put it all together, suddenly something glitches. So you want to test the whole thing then. And then go back. It's a form of continuous improvement. And then refine your templates or develop new templates so that you have a larger and larger body of things to pick from. NVDA is an open source screen reader. That's the one that I used when we were testing customizable courseware. What we decided to do for our strategy for customizable courseware was because we are developing for 3 tools and because we allow our customers to edit everything, the easiest way to approach an overall strategy for CC was to create a course transcript of all the copy that could be used to be reviewed by the organization, and also the transcript itself has been tested with the screen reader. And so all of the course content just reads through the course transcript. Because they're safety courses, there's not a lot of high-level interactivity that a learner would miss. If you had a course that was very highly interactive, what you would want to do then is then go up to a higher level of development and have your course test for the screen reader and then offer screen reader users an alternate branching path that when you got to something that required vision or dexterity, offer the similar content in a different, not similar, the exact content in a different experience, but equal experience, and then come back to the main body of the course after that screen. Tools like Lectora make that relatively easy to do. I'm going to just breeze through here quickly some other, actually before I do that, do we have any questions on setting up and the process we use? Yes, sir. The question was, are any of the 3 platforms that we identified, that would be Lectora, Captivate, or Storyline, are better or worse for accessibility? I would say, based on my limited dev experience, I would say Lectora is by far and large the easiest course to develop for, the easiest platform to develop for accessibility. I can't really speak to Storyline. Captivate, if you know what you're doing and you're a dev, you have everything you need to create a highly accessible course. So what I do know with Storyline is that in our storyboards, we actually put the course transcript in the speaker notes, and they appear in, no, do we have to, Thomas, we have to put them in? Or do they automatically? We put them in. So what we do is when our devs are developing in Storyline, they know on our storyboards out of the course transcript section in the speaker notes, they're putting that into the notes section of Storyline. And then when we export our transcript, it exports out. We have to remove all the extraneous tags because the screen reader was reading them, so I created a macro to pull those out, and now I get a clean document that a screen reader can read from beginning to end. So that's how we actually create our transcript. Yes, sir?
I know for a fact that the new Lectora version is going to have accessibility template inside. Do you know if Storyline or Captivate has accessibility templates built in?
I do not know if Storyline or Captivate have accessibility templates built in, but I do know that both Storyline and Captivate are here, so you can march right on over there and ask them that question directly, and they'll be able to answer that for you. All right. Alt text for images. One of the things that's really difficult, I think, for a lot of people to understand that when you're creating an alt text for an image, you're not describing the image itself in terms, you're describing the context and the meaning of why that image is there so that the person getting the experience of the screen reader gets an equal experience. I thought this was actually a really good example. The photo is not of a guide dog and the man. The photo is of Pastel, who is the dog, leading her handler, who holds the harness in his left hand. That conveys a certain sense of why that image is there and what it's showing, as opposed to just simply describing the image. This guide that I linked to here has a plethora of examples like that, and if you really want to get schooled on how to do alt tags and do them well, I love that little guide. And also I love it because Pastel is so cute, and I'm a dog lover, and it was just fun. But contrast and color checking. Be sure to check your templates for contrast. One of the things that before I came on board with EOB, we have in a lot of organizations, we have folks of a younger generation, how do I say, a newer generation, they got better eyes than I do, okay? And there's a truth of the matter is, as we get older, it takes more light to be able to see the same thing because our eyes don't work the same way. So what we tend to find is that folks who are younger, who are designers, they see contrast and they see smaller text very differently than people of a certain age or people of any age who have a visual impairment. So it's really important and really helpful that there are tools to take all the guesswork out of that, and that we can plug our text in, and you'll see that the text with the purple on the black background, while that might look really cool to somebody, or even if it was purple on a dark gray, it might look really cool. It failed the contrast ratio, whereas the gold text on the black, it's actually very dark navy blue background, did pass. There's something really interesting about this as a kind of interesting aside. It is not just the color, but it's also the luminosity. So we have some really odd colors that I would have thought never passed, and we had some other ones that we thought were a slam dunk, and when we put them through the checker, they gave us varying results. This is another great way of setting up your corporate or organizational templates, using the colors that you want, coming up with standards for using type. And this is great. These can carry right into your PowerPoint set as well. Never using just, we talked about not using just text, just color as the only source, but also using the contrast checker. One of the things we found for using, example, this course, learning check. So we didn't just change, we originally started by just changing it. We'll change it to green if it's right, and we'll change it to red if it's not. But what we also added was Now, the green one, you'll notice that the whole box is dark. It's not just that the top turned green, now the whole box is dark, and you get the feedback. So when we put that into contrast checker, we know that checked, but we can also put that into this color blindness checker, and we can check that for green color blindness, and we can imagine what somebody who has a green color blindness would see that as. And you'll notice that, again, the whole box is clearly changing color, and that the feedback at the top gives them the not quite and the prescriptive feedback. So there's more than one way. The color alone didn't do it. So here's the link, the big link. This is the big kahuna right here. This is your quick reference guide. This is a great place to start. And although they tell you specifically do not use the quick ref as the full standard, it's a perfect place to kind of get your feet wet and then determine, well, wait a minute, what do they really mean by this, and use it as the gateway to drive you to where you can go into the full standard and learn more. So we're coming to the end. We discussed our process. I hope I gave you some design strategies that you'll find helpful. I gave you some links, and again, please leave me either your business card or see somebody, if you write down your information, or just be looking, make sure you're subscribed as a member of eLearning Brothers, and I'll make sure that in our next mailing, if not our next one, the next one after that, that we have a blog post specifically with all of these. Like Zach, who is our head of marketing, is nodding vehemently. We get you everything, so we'll make sure you get that. Any last questions, parting questions? Nope. Oh, no time. Sorry, that's it, guys.